Ambassador Kalen of the Thorian Collective stood motionless, a monolith of polished green marble in the cavernous chamber of the Galactic Council. His form was a slow, deliberate sculpture, his consciousness a placid lake reflecting eons of patience. Around him, the chamber hummed with the frantic energy of 1,000 species. The air shimmered with holographic displays, the scent of ozone and exotic spices filling the space. A human delegation, led by the perpetually weary-looking commander Eva Rostova, stood near the central dais. They were a stark contrast to the serene Thorian, their movements sharp, their conversations clipped. "They are insects," Kalen's voice resonated, a low thrum that vibrated in the bones of those nearby. "Their civilization is a flash fire, bright, hot, and extinguished in a geological eye blink." Commander Rostova, her face a mask of diplomatic calm, did not turn to face him. "Ambassador, your species has existed for 10 millennia. We've had written language for 5,000 years. We are a different kind of flame, not a lesser one." The Thorian's response was a slow, deliberate blink, a gesture so profound it lasted a full 10 seconds. The chamber fell silent as the great doors at the far end hissed open, revealing the Council's ancient arbiter, the being known only as the Speaker. Its form was a swirling nebula of light and shadow, its voice the sound of distant stars being born. "The matter of the void anomaly is now before the Council," the Speaker announced, its gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. "All species are threatened. All must contribute. The Thorian Collective has proposed the construction of the Great Shield, a defensive lattice woven from the crystalline spores of the Xylosian Nebula. It is a project of such scale and permanence that only a species with our perspective could conceive it." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber, a wave of ancient minds finding comfort in a solution that matched their own timescale. Rostova felt a cold knot form in her stomach. A shield built on a Thorian timescale was no shield at all. It was a monument to their own slowness. The human delegation's private chamber was a stark contrast to the Council's grandeur. Steel walls, utilitarian chairs, and the ever-present hum of recycled air. Commander Rostova paced the length of the room, her boots echoing on the cold floor. "They don't get it," she muttered, more to herself than to her team. "They see a threat and think of building a wall. A permanent, unchanging wall." Her chief engineer, a grizzled man named Silas Thorne, leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Their spore lattice is a marvel, Commander. Stable, resilient. It would last for eons." "Eons," Rostova repeated, stopping her pacing to stare out the small viewport at the swirling, chaotic beauty of the galaxy. "By the time they've woven 1/10 of it, the void anomaly will have swallowed half the Orion spur. We need something that works now. Something that can be built, modified, and adapted in real time." Her science officer, a brilliant but socially anxious young woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation to Silas, was hunched over a datapad, her fingers flying across the surface. "Commander, I've been running the simulations on the Thorian proposal. The energy requirements alone are staggering. It would require siphoning power from the galactic core for a standard century just to initiate the project." Silas snorted. "A century? That's a lifetime for most of us. A dozen generations for them. They can't even conceive of a deadline that tight." Rostova's eyes narrowed. "Exactly. They see a problem that unfolds over millennia, and they propose a solution that takes millennia. We see a problem that unfolds in months, and we need a solution that can be built in weeks. We are ants trying to reason with elephants, but our anthill is on fire." She turned from the viewport, her expression hardening with resolve. "We need to show them we have something they don't. Something they could never, ever understand." The Thorian delegation's chamber was a sanctuary of silence. Ambient light filtered through living crystal panes, casting slow-moving shadows across floors of moss and stone. Ambassador Kalen was in a state of deep communion, his consciousness intertwined with the very architecture of the room. The frantic energy of the council chamber was here a distant, irritating buzz. He was disturbed by the presence of a single, uninvited guest, Commander Rostova. She stood in the center of the room, a stark, linear figure in a dark gray uniform. She did not wait to be acknowledged. "Ambassador," she began, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Your plan is elegant. It is permanent. It is, in its own way, beautiful. Kalen's form shifted slightly, a ripple moving across his marble-like surface. Your words are as fleeting as your species, Commander. Appreciation of permanence requires the patience to perceive it. Perhaps, Rostova conceded, her tone even. But permanence is not always the answer. Sometimes, the only way to defeat a chaotic force is to be more chaotic, more adaptable, more alive. She gestured to a holographic display she had projected, showing the chaotic, ever-shifting front of the void anomaly. Your shield is a fortress. We propose a different kind of defense. A living one. Kalen's consciousness recoiled. The very idea was anathema. Living? You speak of chaos. Of organic decay. We seek order. Stability. We speak of resilience, Rostova countered, her voice gaining a sliver of steel. Your shield can only be what it is. Our defense can be anything it needs to be. It can learn. It can change. It can grow. She let the image of the anomaly hang in the air, a silent, terrifying testament to the inadequacy of permanence. Kalen was silent for a long time, a silence that stretched into minutes. The very concept of a defense that was not static was a violation of his most fundamental understanding of the universe. It was, to him, a form of madness. Back in their own chamber, the mood was electric with a desperate kind of hope. Rostova's team had been working around the clock. Silas was now sketching on a transparent tablet, his lines sharp and decisive. The core of it is a self-replicating nanite swarm, he explained, his voice thick with excitement. But not just any swarm. We'll encode them with a simple directive: consume the anomaly. Convert its chaotic energy into a stable, crystalline lattice. But the key is the control matrix. Dr. Eris nodded, her eyes wide. The control matrix is a quantum entangled network. It allows for instantaneous communication across the swarm, regardless of distance. But more importantly, it's designed for constant, rapid-fire adaptation. It's a learning system. It will analyze the anomaly's properties in real time and evolve its own tactics. It's not a shield. It's a weapon that builds its own shield as it fights. Rostova looked from one to the other, a fierce pride swelling in her chest. This is it. This is the argument. This is the thing they can't comprehend. She turned to the comm officer, a young man named Finn. Finn, I want a direct line to the Thorian's primary science attaché. No council channels. No delays. And I want you to transmit the full technical schematics. Everything. Finn's eyes widened. Commander, that's our entire strategic advantage. If they get their hands on this, they won't be able to build it, Rostova said, her voice firm. They don't have the processing speed. They don't have the cultural mindset for rapid, iterative design. They'll see the schematics and see chaos. They'll see a machine that is never finished. They'll reject it as fundamentally flawed. We have to show them the idea. The principle of adaptive, living machinery. She took a deep breath. It's a risk, but it's the only one we have. Ambassador Kalen received the transmission in a state of profound contemplation. The human schematic appeared in his mind, a cascade of data that was, to him, an assault. It was a symphony of noise, a storm of information. He observed the core principles, a swarm of infinitesimal machines, a network of instantaneous communication, a directive to constantly change and adapt. It was the antithesis of order. It was a philosophy of impermanence. His Thorian science attaché, a being named Lyra, projected her own analysis beside the human data. The energy requirements are immense, Ambassador. The computational load is staggering. It is a system designed for a mind that thinks in moments, not millennia. It is a solution for a fire, not a glacier. Kalen remained silent, his consciousness sifting through the chaotic data. He saw the elegance of it, not in its form, but in its function. It was not a monument. It was a process, a verb, not a noun. He recalled Commander Rostova's words, more alive. The concept was abhorrent, yet it resonated with a strange, dissonant truth. The void anomaly was not a static threat. It was a living, breathing thing of pure chaos. To fight it with static order was like trying to stop a flood with a stone wall. The flood would simply flow around it. But a solution that could flow with the flood, that was a different matter entirely. He dismissed Lyra's analysis. You are looking at it with a Thorian eye, he rumbled. We must look at it with a human one. Not for what it is, but for what it does. He turned his full attention to the schematics, forcing his slow, deliberate mind to grasp the frantic, beautiful logic of a species that built things to be unmade. The council chamber was in an uproar. The debate over the competing proposals had devolved into a cacophony of ancient voices and frantic arguments. The speakers' forms swirled with agitation. The Thorian shield represents stability, the permanence required to survive a cosmic cataclysm. The human adaptive matrix represents resilience, the ability to survive by changing. The arguments were stale, a reflection of the fundamental incompatibility of the two species. Ambassador Kalen stood to address the chamber. His voice, when it came, was a wave of calm that silenced the room. We have studied the human proposal. It is a system of profound and unsettling dynamism. It is, in its essence, a form of life, a machine that learns, that evolves, that is never complete. It is anathema to our way of being. Yet, he paused, a deliberate, heavy silence falling over the chamber. The void anomaly is not a static object. It is a process of entropy made manifest. It is a cancer that grows and changes. To fight a cancer with a static wall is to invite it to find a way over, under, or through. The human solution is not a wall. It is a swarm of white blood cells. It is a system that fights fire with fire, chaos with chaos. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The comparison to a disease, to a biological process, was the ultimate insult to the Thorian love of order. Kalen continued, undeterred. We, who have existed for 10,000 years, cannot comprehend the speed of their thought. We see a machine that is never finished, and we see failure. They see a machine that is always improving, and they see success. Their greatest strength, the one they have used to conquer the stars, is not their technology, but their capacity for endurance. Not the endurance of stone, but the endurance of a lone voyager in the dark. The endurance of being the only one who understands the problem. He turned his gaze towards Rostova, who stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. Their solution is built for loneliness, for isolation. It is a machine designed to be alone in the dark and fight. It is a solution for a species that knows what it is like to be the only one who can act. The decision was made. The Council, in a moment of unprecedented insight, had voted to fund the human adaptive matrix. The Thorian Collective, while still skeptical, had agreed to provide the raw materials, the crystalline spores of the Xylosian nebula, seeing in the human plan a strange, complementary logic to their own. The work began immediately, a frantic, galaxy-spanning effort. Human engineers and Thorian artisans worked side by side, a study in contrasts. The Thorian spore weavers moved with glacial grace, their hands weaving the crystalline lattice with a patience that bordered on the divine. The human technicians swarmed around them, their movements a blur of activity, their comms channels crackling with rapid-fire updates. Silas Thorne was in his element, directing the human effort with a mix of gruff commands and infectious enthusiasm. Right, you lot. Listen up. We need to integrate the phase inverters with the spore conduits without disrupting the quantum entanglement. And Eris, I need that adaptive algorithm patch ready in 5 minutes, not 5 hours. Dr. Eris, her face glowing with the light of a dozen monitors, barked back. I'm pushing the limits of quantum physics here, Silas. You want a miracle? You give me a minute. Commander Rostova moved through the chaos like a stone in a river, her presence a focal point of calm authority. She watched the two species work, the ancient and the new, the slow and the fast. She saw a Thorian artisan pause, its crystalline hand hovering over a complex junction, and a human technician patiently waiting, not a trace of impatience on his face. She saw a moment of understanding, a silent acknowledgement that their two approaches, while so different, were not mutually exclusive. One provided the foundation, the other provided the function. It was the beginning of a new kind of collaboration, built not on shared history, but on shared survival. The activation of the adaptive matrix was a moment held in breathless anticipation. The completed device, a sphere of intertwined crystal and shimmering energy fields, hung in the center of the chamber. All of the Council's most powerful beings were present, their collective will focused on the event. Commander Rostova stood with Ambassador Kalen, a silent, unlikely pair. We do not know if this will work, Kalen's voice rumbled, the first admission of doubt Rostova had ever heard from him. "We know it will," she replied, her voice steady. "Because it has to." The final countdown began. A human voice, crisp and clear, echoed through the chamber. Initializing quantum entanglement network. Swarm deployment in 10-9. Rostova felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach, the same one she felt before every jump, every battle. This was different. This was for everything. The sphere pulsed with light, and then, with a sound like 1,000 voices whispering at once, it unleashed its swarm. A cloud of infinitesimal machines, invisible to the naked eye, streamed out into the chamber. They swirled around the test hologram of the void anomaly, a representation of the true threat. For a moment, nothing happened. The ancient beings in the chamber began to murmur, their patience wearing thin. And then, the light show began. The swarm coalesced, forming a lattice of pure energy that shimmered and shifted, constantly changing its shape and frequency. It was a breathtaking, terrifying display of controlled chaos. The holographic anomaly, a swirling vortex of darkness, slammed against the lattice. The lattice did not hold firm. It flowed. It bent. It adapted, its shimmering patterns shifting in response to the attack, finding weaknesses and reinforcing them in a fraction of a second. It was a dance, a violent, beautiful ballet of destruction and creation. Ambassador Kalen watched, his marble-like form utterly still. He was seeing something he had never conceived of. He was seeing a solution that was not a wall, but a living, breathing thing. He was seeing the future. The great silence fell over the chamber as the last echoes of the test dissipated. The adaptive matrix had not only held, it had defeated the holographic anomaly, converting its chaotic energy into a stable, harmless crystal lattice that settled to the floor like a layer of diamond dust. The speaker's form swirled with a light that Rostova had never seen before, a light of pure, unadulterated awe. The council erupted, not in the usual cacophony of debate, but in a wave of applause, a sound that was a physical force in the air. Ambassador Kalen turned to face Commander Rostova. His slow, deliberate movements seemed different now, imbued with a new purpose. "You built a shield that is not a shield," he said, his voice filled with a reverence she had never heard from him before. "You built a mind." Rostova allowed herself a small, tired smile. "We built a tool for a lonely fight." The speaker's voice boomed, echoing with finality. "The Galactic Council recognizes the ingenuity of the human species. The adaptive matrix is the chosen solution. We will deploy it across the galaxy." As the celebrations began, Rostova found herself walking away from the dais, towards the viewport that looked out upon the starfield. Ambassador Kalen fell into step beside her. For a long time, they stood in silence, watching the stars. "Your species is a mystery," Kalen finally said. "You build things that are meant to be used up. You live lives that are a blink in our history. You wage wars and make peace with a speed that defies comprehension." He paused, the silence stretching between them. "And yet, you understood the one thing we, who live forever, could never grasp. You understood that the only way to fight a monster that never stops changing is to be a monster that never stops changing. You understood that the strongest fortress is not the one that stands forever, but the one that can always rebuild itself." Rostova looked at the ancient being beside her, a being who had seen empires rise and fall, and she saw, for the first time, not an adversary, but a partner. A partner in a universe that was far, far bigger and stranger than any of them could have imagined. They stood together, a human and a Thorian, watching the silent, spinning stars, and for the first time in a very long time, they did not feel alone.